Deputy Aylward.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, welcome our new John Connaughton here and wish him the best in his job. He has a hard job in front of him, and you're always under scrutiny, I suppose. That's the important thing, and spending public money. I just want to start, in the Controller of the General said the overall spend was 15.2 billion for the year in concern 2016, and yet in the vote 13.64 billion was mentioned in the vote of the vote 38 head. What's the difference there? Can anyone explain that 1.7 or 6 billion? That's just to fill me in. Where's the 1.6 billion that went? One is saying one and the other saying the other.
The simplest part of it would be one is 2016 and one is 2017.
It gets very complicated. We have two sets of accounts. One is the appropriation account for 2016, not all of which goes to the HSE, but the lion's share. And then we have the HSE's 2017 accounts. And then just to make life even more complicated, when you're working in the appropriation account, there's both the gross amount, the total spend, and then there's also the exchequer amount, or the net spend, because we get some income sources from places other than the exchequer. For example, the UK contribute money to us, and other revenues come into the vote. So they can all be reconciled, but it's not a terribly straightforward task to reconcile.
So what's the cost of the taxpayer actually? Is it 15.2 or 30? Is it 15.2 or 13.649?
So then the cost in 17 for the HSE, if you take all our pay costs and all our suppliers' costs, is the 15.2 broadly.
15.2 is the figure.
Yeah, we then have income, some of which is from patient charges and some of which is from superannuation, etc., which offsets some of that, and you end up with a net figure of 14 point something. But the total cost is the larger figure, the total cost of running it. It's not all funded directly by the exchequer.
Can I ask you, you know, we're always talking about the spend on health, and it's the biggest spend in the country and on the taxpayer. Is the problem of health service and what the problems we have all through all the different parts of the health, is it money then, or is it efficiency, or is it if the government of the day or the Minister of Health of the day or here on the Dáil decides to give you 16 billion, would that sort all ills, or is it just because I'm regularly asked that, and we're always saying that it's more efficiency is needed in the service, that the money is adequate to provide the service that's needed across all sectors, but that we're not getting value for money. Can I put that to you?
All of the above. I don't think anybody could say that every euro is used as effectively as it could be, and actually that's the experience of health services the world over, and we have still some distance to go to try and ensure that we're absolutely best in class when we seek to deliver services. The fact that the population is growing and ageing is placing us under pressure, and will continue to place us under significant pressure to grow services. I think for the health service to believe that the only way to grow services is to wait for additional money to fall through the letterbox every year to invest in new services won't be sufficient to address that demand. We will also have to look at how we organise our services and how productive they are. And actually that does go to the heart of the Sláinte Care report, which Mr Connaughton has referred to. Often you find individual parts of the service are working productively, but we're not properly joined up and the right services are not being offered in the right place. So to take the example made earlier, where somebody is waiting for speech and language therapy for a year and as a result of that experiences a developmental delay, then when eventually they are seen, their requirements are going to be significantly more complex than perhaps if they had been seen earlier. So putting resources into the community, into a primary care setting for much more accessible care can often help us to avoid some of the more expensive approaches of highly specialist care, acute hospital care and so on. And that is the key to the Sláinte Care vision. And then the other key is working really smartly, using information, using technology, and doing things really well. I mentioned telehealth earlier on. So we need to move forward with a huge reform agenda, but it won't be one that will be delivered with a static budget, but neither can it be one that has an open-ended checkbook. There's no country in the world can afford that.
Yeah, but if you find deficiencies or waste or whatever you like to call it, whatever word and you're trying to improve it every year, which is natural, everyone wants to get to the highest standard or whatever it's set, are you eliminating those deficiencies and waste? You know, are we getting, again, I ask the same question, value for money? You know, we're told in other countries they're spending per capita, per person, they're spending, that we are spending as high as anyone else, but that we not get the same value for our buck.
Okay. Can I just maybe add some colour to Mr. Breslin's remarks, and can I thank you for your kind opening remarks as well. So what examples do we have of the ability of the health service right now in Ireland to pursue good value for money, is the first question. And the second question, to my mind, is how can we spread that best practice throughout Ireland? So just consider perhaps 3 different types of value for money activity in terms of a pursuit of better value for the public purse. One is what I would call the usual suspects, and these are the base things that are non-clinical in essence. This is good procurement. Okay, this is things like the conversion of agency into full-time and substantive posts. These are things like the efficiencies in back office services like print, like energy, like postage, etc., and also shared services of non-clinical frontline. You know, we don't need to have 29 of everything throughout Ireland, or 56 of everything throughout Ireland. So those are things that are being pursued right now by each CHO and by each hospital group. So that's the first category. Now, please understand that that first category only touches a certain element of the cost base. Okay, so you need to look beyond that in terms of being able to look at the entire 15.2 billion. Yep. So the second category I would then draw your attention to is clinical efficiency, and we need to do a lot more there. Now, clinical efficiency doesn't mean that we need our clinicians to work harder, or, well, maybe in some cases we do, but to work perhaps smarter with better technology and more modern methods of delivery of services, where we need to help clinicians do that. So an example there is perhaps the pursuit of theatre efficiency. We know that if we were to arrange things better and take a look at the best performing theatre system in Ireland, then we'd probably get more throughput. Okay? But to do that, we probably need some investment in things like theatre systems and new and innovative ways of working. So that's an example of clinical efficiency. The third and the biggest area, and this is where most of the 15 billion would lie, is what I would call efficiencies that are associated with the model of care. So let me just boil that down into a couple of big things. Sloan Care gives us a hook here, and one of the big hooks here is the separation of elective and unscheduled care. And I came from a system here where we had developed that over a 5-year period. And what we found by separating elective and unscheduled care was much greater efficiency in terms of throughput, unrestricted and not stopped by the vagaries of winter, where you had protected elective time and you could really plan efficiency and throughput through a system, which in that case was protected. So I think the idea in Slaughter Care to do something, an investment in that, will drive better clinical efficiency. And I'll give you perhaps another example, is that we can do things differently. Mr. Breslin has made reference to the fact that we're perhaps doing too much inside an acute system. Okay? So if I take some of the examples that are out there, like the Sligo Air Care model or the Letterkenny urology model, okay, which moves activity out of the hospital system into a community. Okay, it's faster delivery, it's closer to home, but it's also more efficient. It allows those clinicians inside that acute system to be able to concentrate on the things that they really need to concentrate on. So those are 3 buckets of where we can really pursue value for money. We're only part way down that road.
Can I ask a more personal question now, because of the recent fallouts over the cervical cancer thing, and it's a general thought out there in the general public that the HSE, no one can be touched, no one can be moved aside. If a personnel, and I'm not individually picking out anyone, is not up to scratch or not doing their job, and are identified with not doing their job, are they sanctions there where they can be moved aside, even sacked if necessary? Because this is very important over the recent scandals, if you want to call them scandals, or whatever word you want to put on it. It's very important that the public out there are assured that someone is not up to scratch. If not up to scratch in other departments, are up to scratch, they're either taken out or moved aside, in other countries in particular. But in this country, the general opinion from the public is that no one can be touched within the HSE, that no matter what goes wrong, no one takes responsibility, no one is moved aside, no one is either demoted or set aside or moved to some other department, they're left in position, and the thing just goes on. Can you answer that? That's very important to the public out there for confidence in the HSE.
Indeed, I think it's a very good question. Can I address the question in 2 parts, perhaps? Okay. I've already given the committee in the session immediately before this an answer on what we're doing on the conduct investigation. Okay, and I need to be absolutely neutral on this. We've got 116,000 staff inside the HSE. Okay, many of them are doing a fantastic job every day of the week, and particularly when it comes to times when provision of healthcare to the nation is threatened, things like storms and snow, etc. So many of them are doing a fantastic job, and that is actually reflected in the patient satisfaction surveys that we have. However, you raise a more fundamental point, and that is the point about what is the process that we have in place to be able to assess, particularly senior managers and staff in responsible positions. How do we assess whether or not the objectives that they are meant to pursue in a year on a personal basis are actually being delivered? Okay? We don't have that system currently operating within the Irish healthcare system, and that's something that I think we need to consider very carefully as we go forward. This is one of the things that's on my radar.
So you bring in new regulations or standards, or I mean, you bring in a new code of conduct, or some whatever word you'd like to use. I mean, or is it just going to be the same system as we had up to now?
Well, we've got a code of practice and governance in relation to public bodies. Okay, that does make reference to. I think it's a good start. It makes reference to ethics. It makes reference to conflicts of interest, etc. Whether or not that's entirely fit for purpose, because that's based at an organisational level, for the individual remains to be seen. So that's something we need to consider.
The reason why I dwell on this is just to get confidence back to the public and the HSE and the workers of the HSE and the personnel of the HSE. That's why I'm dwelling on this, because it's important we get that message out there to the public in general that this thing will be rectified and standards and procedures will be put in place to make sure everything's up to scratch.
Deputy, we're
okay.
You'll get in a second opportunity later in the afternoon.
10 minutes. No.
Yeah, speaking.
Well, can I ask a more personal question? Yeah, the heat stuff.
Well, there must be a Kilkenny question.
Yes, the southeast
Go on.
Well, I mean, there is a general election coming up, you know.
Pardon?
There is a general election.
There will be a second opportunity after the voting.
Anyway, no, besides all the joking. No, the HSE and my colleague, Deputy Callahan, has mentioned about the psychiatric service in the southeast. I want to, and I know, and he's mentioned, I'm not going to go over again about the juvenile services, and it is disgrace to say we're having a juvenile psychiatry. I'm southeast, I'm Kilkenny as well as Waterford, and to say we're having a juvenile service of psychiatry in the southeast now. If a young person had a problem, and you know the area, the cost, the sooner, and less expense on the HSE and on the country and the taxpayer, the sooner. And we have no one in the southeast, for 5 counties now in the southeast, we have no psychiatric service for underage. I'm not going to dwell on that, so I want to ask about the psychiatric service for adults in particular in St. Luke's and Kilkenny, because this week a strike was averted down there by management because of overcrowding in the psychiatric unit in St. Luke's, where there's 44 bed, two units, and I raised in the draw and got a complete. But anyway, it's some such like it's being called off. This is the second time this strike has been threatened now by SIP2 workers, because they said they'll turn up from work because of the overcrowding condition. They had to bring it to their head and say they will not work in the system that's been in place there. Now they're promising what I'm being told is what a southeast bed management officer is what's needed for the whole southeast. That includes Wexford, Waterford, Carlow, Kilkenny and Tipperary. And that an officer that would be able to manage the beds. There's also a 14-unit unit being promised for Clonmel to be open to relieve the pressure on Kilkenny, and the same way in Wexford and Waterford. Just when I get this opportunity here in front of you, I want to ask you a question. Have you a plan for the psychiatric services in the southeast, both juvenile and adult? And in particular, I'm speaking about St. Luke's and the unit there that's overcrowded.
So I've been made aware of St. Luke's, and I'm glad and appreciative of the staff deferring any industrial action on that. That's it is a wake-up call. Okay.
It's been on for a long time now.
We shouldn't have too many of those. Okay. I'm aware that the position on what that plan is. Okay. Will be resolved, I hope, by July the 12th. Okay. Part of that will include putting additional resources in to accelerate discharge of a number of patients, such that we have got those patients in a more appropriate setting where we relieve some of the pressure. So local management is on the case. There's a deadline, there's a clock ticking on that. and I would hope that we can resolve the issues to the satisfaction of local staff and patients by about the middle of this month.
And would you look at a bed management officer for the whole South East that would be able to divide beds and make sure there's enough beds available for those people that require that services? And you know, psychiatric services are very important to you.
So that would be considered as part of the plan.
Okay.
A more comprehensive, detailed note to the committee?
Yes, we could.
Yeah.
We could. And can I suggest?
And that would be helpful to the deputy.
Can I suggest I do that after July the 12th?
Yeah,
that's fine.
That's no problem. That's not
fine.
too far away.
Yeah, we're happy with that. Okay, Deputy Alan Kelly.